This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
People used to tell me, oh, that's a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. Well, all I need is one. Just one.
That's right. That's right. Keith Bilbrey, I am so excited about this opportunity.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited you're here.
Well, thank you. And we should say we're on location here at Middle Tennessee State University.
Yes, the Center for Innovation in Media.
How about that?
Boy, if they'd had something like this at Tennessee Tech when I was going to school, I would still be there. I would never have left. It's a wonderful program.
It is a wonderful program. It is, and we're thrilled that there's new opportunity here for you.
Oh,
we're gonna talk about that with Roots Radio, but you know, I'm serious that this is an honor. You are from Cookeville, Tennessee.
Yep.
You continue to have an amazing career in media and television and radio. Your Wikipedia. Now, you know, not many people get their own Wikipedia. But you have your own Wikipedia, and it talks about you being country music DJ. You have this incredible career.
I've been very blessed. I really have. Nobody's more surprised than I am, Becky.
I don't believe that.
I just wanted to sit at WHUB and play records. You know, that was my big dream.
Well, you know what? We both got our start at WHUB.
Yes, we did.
Radio in Cookeville. Mm-hmm. And tell me about your start. You were younger than me when I started. You were 16.
I was eat up with it from a very early age. I decided, I don't know why. I'm working on a book, and the opening of the book says, sometimes you choose your career and sometimes it chooses you. And I think in my case, it chose me. I don't know how that happened. When I was just a little bitty fella, my cousin, Jackie Stockton, I would make her go up to WHUB with me because I didn't want to go in there by myself. And this is when they were above Maddox Hardware. This is how far back that goes. And I would sit in front of that window and watch those guys just as long as Louise Medley would let me. She'd finally run me off, you know. But and Jackie would say, Keith, please, let's go. I said, no, we can't. But the folks there were so good to me. I remember the first announcer I saw was Bill Masters. There was a fellow by the name of Jim Fouch, and I've lost contact with Jim, but he came out one day and saw that I had an interest and explained to me what VU meters did.
Oh,
the intensity of the sound, the volume, and all that. And Louise was very nice to me, and then, of course, later on we all became friends and worked together.
Right.
Now, I didn't work up there. I was down on Spring Street when I came along. But I wanted to do it so badly, and I just bugged the heck out of Eldon Burgess. Eldon was a customer of my father's at East Side Shell, and I would, every time he came in to fill up, he got filled up with me, wanting to be on the radio. And of course, I did an audition tape for Stacy Mott, and it was funny because Stacy called me one day and wanted to know if I could come and work on Friday night, and I said, "Oh, Mr. Mott, I'm sorry, I have a date that night." And you know, I've asked Stacy about, would you have called me again if I'd canceled out because of a date?
Right.
Well, I did at the moment, and I called Carl Fincher, who I was going out with. And I said, Carl, you're not going to believe this. Stacy Mott just called and wanted me to work Friday night, but I told him we had a date. And Carl says, Keith, you get back on the phone and call him and tell him you will be there.
That is great.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah.
Fincher, right.
And I called him back. I said, well, Mr. Mott, I got out of my date. I can do it. And so I came to work.
Well, Carl Fincher's another. She's had an incredible career as an actress here in Nashville.
We've kept up with each other through the years, and Henry and Alice.
Right.
Finchers are still real good friends.
So you went from this little, small, rural station in Cookeville, Tennessee, WHUB, and how important were lessons you learned there that you took with you?
It was broadcast 101. You know, at WHUB, you did it all. You did production, you did on-air work, you played every kind of music you can think of. You did news, you typed obituaries. You learned not to laugh when you were giving obituaries, and occasionally, you know,
Right.
When you're not supposed to laugh, that's when it's funniest. And obituaries are never funny. I don't mean that, but for some reason your giggle box would get turned over, as my aunt used to say. But you really did. You learned to do it all, and you learned to be very self-reliant in radio and to solve the problems yourself, because you didn't always have somebody there to. So I worked with such great broadcasters like Stacy Mott and Gene Davis and Eldon Burgess, Tommy Grider, Ken Mabry.
Oh, there's
the list
so
goes
many.
on. Bill Masters.
Right.
The list goes on and on and on.
And of course, the judge always, Judge Medley was always in charge,
and
right?
Mike and Martin Medley.
Right.
I still keep up with those guys. And I even got to turn on the recorder for the Wilmoth Quartet when they taped their program.
Oh, did you really?
Of course, I was always trying to get them tickled through the glass, and sometimes I succeeded.
So you went to Nashville then at a young age, really?
Well,
you went to Tennessee Tech for a few years, but then you left and you went to Nashville. And just, listing some of the things, the announcer for WSM, the announcer for the Grand Ole Opry, WSM TV, so many things, the Ralph Emery Show.
Oh, many years.
Which we all loved
fun.
watching you on the Ralph Emery Show.
Yeah. I got to WSM the same way I got to WHUB, persistence. Elmer Alley, who hired me for TV, said, "You are the most persistent candidate I've ever had." I would call every week, and his secretary, Brenda Jordan, would say, "Elmer, Keith Bilbrey's on the phone." And Elmer Alley would pick up the phone and talk to me.
Oh, really?
And that always impressed me. And I think I sent him an audition tape, and he hand carried it to Dave Overton and said, "Dave, would you please hire this guy? He's worrying me to death." So Dave hired me for WSM FM, and that kind of got my foot in the door. And then the morning job came. Bill Hall went to nights, and they needed a weatherman in the morning. I'd never done weather in my life. But I went and auditioned. You just jumped in? Well, Gary Beatty he had done weather in Huntsville, and I said, "Gary, could you just take me in the studio and show me what to do?" And he did, and that was enough to get by on the audition. And Elmer called me in and said, "Well, you did pretty good on your audition. I think if you want to do it, we'll try you out." So that weekend, I went to the library. I checked out every book I could find on meteorology, a quick study. I didn't know how to tie a tie, and I got a buddy of mine to show me how, and I practiced all weekend tying a tie.
Oh my goodness!
I didn't have any ties. I didn't buy ties. But come Monday, I was ready, and I remember standing there at the weather board, and Ralph was going to introduce me, and I thought, what if he forgets he probably didn't even know what my name is. I remember what was going through my mind. And the next thing I knew, it was like, "And Keith Bilbrey's here with the weather." And I'm like, oh, you do know my name, okay.
Oh, that had to be so thrilling.
That was such a great show and a great learning experience. And later on, I got to do the scene at 6 and 10 and do some weekend weather. I was a booth announcer. Back then, they had live TV booth announcers.
Right.
And they basically paid you to watch TV.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
that's
once an hour you'd
job.
break in and say, "You're watching Channel 4 WSM TV, broadcasting service of the National Life and Accident Insurance Company," and that was it.
How was that transition to the big time? I mean, really, it's big time. It was.
Well,
WSM,
it certainly was for me.
Country radio.
That was a dream of mine to get to work there. When
country music radio is known really throughout the country because of WSM.
Sure. Well, when I was 12 years old, we went to the Grand Ole Opry for the first time. I'd listened to it all my life. I had in my mind exactly what Grant Turner looked like, and we went to the Grand Ole Opry. I can tell you exactly where we sat at the Ryman. The curtain went up, and there stood this little old man at the podium. Well, that can't be Grant Turner.
And it was.
Well, he opened his mouth, and it wasn't. I remember I ran downstairs and just stood and stared at him. I often wonder if Grant thought, "Who is this character?"
Well, isn't that something that at the Grand Ole Opry, you didn't focus on the performers. You focused on the speaker, the announcer.
And that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so, as a matter of fact, Grant's daughter, Nancy, was going to Tennessee Tech. And I met her at Tech. And Grant was up there from time to time to see her, and I got to be good friends with him. And I'm sure his recommendation went a long way when when they needed an opera announcer.
So-
I'll have to tell you that story. I was sitting
Yes.
in English class, and I thought I was pretty hot stuff. I played rock and roll records on WHUB at night.
Right.
And somebody was asking about it. They had recognized me. And I said, yeah, well, I was leaning back, and this girl behind me said, my dad's on the radio. And I said, oh, yeah, who's that? She said, Grant Turner.
Oh,
I
that's
felt about that
yeah,
small.
that's
Oh, no.
the Grant Turner.
The Grant Turner.
So, tell me about the opportunity that you got to be the announcer for the Grand Ole Opry. That had to be a dream.
Well,
come through.
Actually, it started with being announcer on the Midnight Jamboree. Harold Hensley was given that position up and wanted to know if I wanted to do it. And of course, I jumped at the chance and had to meet Mr. Tubb, and he had to approve it, and he did. And so I went to work at the Midnight Jamboree. And when Chuck Morgan left for the Texas Rangers, I slipped into his spot. And
Wow.
then later on, they didn't need me anymore, and I was just heartbroken. But within 2 weeks, TNN called and said, hey, we're starting Grand Ole Opry Live, and we'd like for you to host it. Okay, so we did that for 15 years in addition to announcing on the Opry. So it all works out,
Yeah, yeah.
in the end. But that's, I remember the first night I was on the Opry, I was scared to death. And all the bigwigs were there. Bud Wendell was over at the side. They were all checking me out. I didn't know they did that, but they did.
Right.
And I remember walking over to Bud Wendell. I said, Mr. Wendell, I will buy you a drink at the Nashville Palace if you'll just leave for about a half hour while I get through this. Oh, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. I later found out that Bud, of course, was in business with Martin and Mike and Luke Medley and the cable company. They were always behind me, whatever I wanted to do.
Right.
I found out later they had several talks with Bud about hiring me, and I'm sure that went a long way. I didn't find that out till years later.
Well,
Yeah.
it's all connectivity.
Yeah, it is.
And so, what would you say are the key principles in what has made you so successful?
Well, I had a dream, and fortunately, not everybody gets to follow their dream, but I did, and I was persistent. I think, and Ralph Emery told me one time, he said, with people getting into the music business and wanting to be a singer or a star, or whatever, he said, I've always thought it was about the 50-50 talent and persistence. Persistence goes a long way, not giving up. And the way I looked at it, I rarely turned down a job. You got to
Right.
go. Some jobs I thought wouldn't amount to anything turned out to be wonderful.
That
Others-
is true.
Yeah, and others, that I thought would really be a big break, turned out to be nothing. So
Right.
it goes both ways. I remember Larry's Country Diner.
Yes.
Larry called and said, "Look, I'm going to do a pilot for this show, and I can't pay you much." I said, "Larry." This was after WSM had let me go. I said, "You're talking to an unemployed man. Of course I'll do it." And it turned out great,
I want to ask you about that. That had to be a painful period in your life
was
when
awful.
WSM let you go.
It was probably the lowest point in my life as far as career is concerned.
Well, yeah. And it came, I know it had to have come as a shock because the public outcry was large. It was huge.
I'm very appreciative of that.
You
I
had
really
4,000 people sign petition. You had all these stars who were reaching out and saying, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so it was not just WSM, it was the Grand Ole Opry. It was both, right?
Yeah. I had been finished my shift that day. I think I got off at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I remember I had a meeting with the program director, which was routine. We did that every week, and they were having a surplus sale of some of the Opryland stuff at the hotel. So I went down there and looked around. Got back and met with the program director, and he said, the station manager wants to be in on this meeting. And I'm thinking, well, I've got a new client or a new endorsement or something. We go up there, and lo and behold, I've worked my last day at WSM after 34 years. And I said, well, what about the Opry? Well, won't get to continue that. They were automating the midday, and the Opry manager told me they were going in a different direction. I'm still not sure what that means, but
Wow.
it was a big shock,
Yeah.
and totally unexpected.
Right.
But one door closes, another one opens,
Right.
and some wonderful things have happened since then. So I haven't looked back too much.
Well, I think that's key, because a lot of people, especially this time of year, you may have things to happen in your life that you think, I don't know how to move on from this.
Well,
and especially if your identity was so wrapped into that.
My son was a big part of that. My oldest son, Mark, I talked to him all the time. He said, Dad, that is not your identity. You are who you are. And you're well past that being your identity. And that really helped a lot. And I had a wife, Emmy Jo, that really encouraged me to get out and do things and keep the name out there. I remember I talked to Jerry Strobel, who was the former building manager at WSM, and he said, Keith, get out there and keep your name out there. I said, well, how long does it take the body to get cold? He said, it gets cold real quickly.
So you got to go fast.
So don't let it die,
right.
Keep it going.
Right.
And
well, you've had an outstanding, that was 2009. You've had an outstanding career since then.
I can't believe all the things that's happened.
Tell some of the things. It's pretty amazing. First of all, you've been inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. Right?
Yeah,
the
that was
Tennessee Radio
pretty
Hall
exciting.
Of Fame.
Yeah.
You've been recognized by the Tennessee State Senate.
Yeah.
You've had multiple opportunities on air. You mentioned Larry's Diner. What about you did a country cooking show with your wife?
Yeah, my wife and I did a little country cooking show, and the producer called and wanted me to do it, and I said, well, David Stallings, I said, David, I don't know how to cook. He said, well, bring your wife. I said, she doesn't know how to cook either. But we had a lot of fun doing that show.
Right.
But one thing after another happened. The first thing that came along was John Walker, who is I'm still involved with here at WMOT. He had Music City Roots, and he called one night and wanted to know if I'd be interested. And I said, well, sure. And started doing that, and that's been a wonderful opportunity.
Yes.
Still going strong.
It's a great series. Of course, we air Music City Roots.
Right. And we do a live show every Wednesday night, and then take parts of that and do the NPT thing. And Larry's Country Diner came along. I had no idea how that would go over. Larry didn't either. And we kind of sat down, and he told me what he wanted to do. And miraculously, it all came together. And that show's been very successful. #1 show on RFD. We've done as many as 2 cruises a year.
Wow.
We do one. We're going back out end of January to the Caribbean. We do 2 weeks every year in Branson. We're gonna start doing some more road shows with it, and the TV show, and it's just been wonderful. Then Music City Roots has blossomed not only into the television show, but now we do programming at WMOT on the campus of Middle Tennessee State, where we are now, and I do a show every day from 9 to noon, and
My goodness.
get to play all these things that radio has become so fragmented, and you've got to stick to this format or that format. Americana really encompasses a lot of great music.
Yes.
Music that you just don't hear anywhere else.
Right.
And I've loved that. I get to play my old friend Guy Clark and John Hartford and John Prine and Mac Wiseman and all these people that I love their music. And then there's some new artists coming along that just blow my mind.
Well, I love the Roots Radio. I love WMOT's change. They're an NPR station, a public radio station, but I love the new change and love hearing you. I think it's just fabulous.
Yeah. I used to tell people, who's going to be on Music City Roots this week? And I'll say, well, I know this act. There's 3 others I don't know. But I found, by and large, I walk away that night a fan.
Right.
Because just some terrific music that needs to be heard.
Absolutely. And of course, we have a great relationship with Todd Mayo and Todd Gerald with Bluegrass Underground.
Yeah.
And when you talk about these performers, many of them are your friends. In your career, you have very close friends in the music industry.
That's one area that I am so thankful for. Through the years, I've developed some wonderful friendships. I mentioned Ernest Tubb. He was just my all-time hero. I never dreamed that he wouldn't even know my name, that I would get to work with him and be friends with him and visit with him. Roy Acuff was a tremendous friend. I guess the biggest show business friend I ever had was George Jones. George and Nancy were so good to me and gave me so many breaks and so many opportunities. to just sit and watch a football game with him at his house, and
What are,
do fun
that's a
things.
special memory.
Yeah.
What are some other really special memories from your time at the Opry? Or
Oh gosh, there's so many things that happened at the Opry. I remember, I don't know whether this is legal or not, but we did it, and he's gone, and I'm not at the Opry, so I don't guess it matters. Jimmy Dickens and I used to pitch pennies out behind the Opry House. You know what
that's
pitching
great.
pennies is?
Well, tell me.
Okay, you stand over, and there's a wall over here, and you take your penny or nickel or whatever, and you flip it, and it hits the wall and bounces out,
back.
and whoever gets closest to the wall wins.
Okay.
And I think the last time we played, I was about 35 cents into Jimmy for it. Jimmy was very good at pitching pennies.
Was he? That is great.
And we did some tours. I remember being in Mobile, Alabama, and this new young artist was on the show. And I mean, he wasn't the headliner by a long shot. I think Ricky Skaggs and Riders in the Sky, I believe Patty Loveless was on that show. And there was this new guy named Garth Brooks that nobody knew.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't even sell out that night.
Wow.
It was a big auditorium. And I remember we did a little portion that was fed back to Nashville. And then we came back and did the full concert. And I remember in between that time, they called in every available security guard they had. Because,
really?
I mean, this guy was going crazy. And it was so funny because I'd had lunch with him that day, but I'd never seen him perform. And I remember going after he performed and people were going nuts, I went backstage and I said, I just want to make sure this is the same guy I had lunch with. Who was that out there,
That's so great.
It was amazing. I remember Patty and I were standing there at the side of the stage. I said, Patty, this must have been what it was like to watch Elvis. I never got to see Elvis, but
Right.
this must have been it.
We're going to run out of time before I get to ask you everything I want to. And you are so good to remember where you're from. You are so good to
I
the
love
people
Cookeville. I'll always love Cookeville.
in Cookeville.
I wish the old house I lived in was still standing. I can't find it. They moved it, and I can't find it. If anybody knows where my old house is, it was at 354 Bunker Hill Road,
Wow.
right at the end of Stout Street. And it's not even Bunker Hill Road anymore.
Well, no.
It's Fouch Street,
Right.
which is no problem. I love the
No,
Fouches, don't get me wrong.
Right. I know how important your family is to you. Your mom and dad, they're so wonderful.
Yeah. Had good raising.
Yeah.
I had a little toy set that I got for Christmas. This is how eat up I was with the radio. It was called a Remco Caravel, and it would actually broadcast very low power off the on the AM dial, and I had it set up in my bedroom. That was my first radio station.
Wow.
And I remember I kept trying to get out further, and I hooked it up to my daddy's boat outside. I thought maybe that would help. And finally, I hooked it up to an antenna. Chuck Allen lived down the street. Chuck is now CEO of Athlon Sports and Parade Magazine.
Oh my goodness.
But I'd send him out with a little little transistor radio, see how far I'd get out that. He was my field tester. Finally hooked it up to the outdoor antenna, and I finally decided what I need is more power. It's ran off a 9-volt battery. I'm a kid. I don't know the difference
Right.
between AC, DC, whatever.
Right.
So I cut the wires and plugged it into the wall.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, the whole thing melted down, blew every fuse in the house. Leo Bilbrey was not happy.
Nope. Your dad.
But I learned a valuable lesson.
Yeah. That is so perfect. And you have a sister that still lives in Cookeville.
Carol, Jerry Joyner. Yeah.
So great. And then your wife and your children, just a wonderful life.
It really is. I am a very blessed man, is the only thing I could say. And fairly good health for an old man,
Listen now, you're in great health. So what's next? We only have a minute or so left.
I have no
What's next
idea.
for you?
I have no idea. I just
You're
hang
going to
on.
write a book?
Yeah. Oh, I have another show that we did mention called Reflections. It's kind of like this show. I just sit down with some of my old buddies that are country stars, and we talk and just we don't do any music, just talk about their career and their life, kind of like we've done here.
We need to see if we can get that. We
Yeah.
need to see if we can get that one. That
Yeah.
sounds great.
That's a good one. I
Well,
enjoy
what
doing
advice would you give to someone who maybe they want to be in media, or maybe they want to, whatever they want to do, maybe they're living in a small town in the Upper Cumberland or throughout Tennessee? What would you tell them?
I remember, do you remember Ellis Cab Company?
Yes.
Vanderbilt Ellis.
Yeah.
He came to pick me up one time to take me somewhere. I was too young to drive. And he said, he was just making small talk. He said, son, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to be on radio and TV, and I want to announce at the Grand Ole Opry. And something about the way I said, I remember he turned around to me, he says, you know what, I believe you'll do it. So I think a positive attitude, number one, never give up, yep. And just take, a failure as a learning lesson to go on and get it right next time, People used to tell me, oh, that's a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. Well, all I need is one, just one.
That's right, that's right.
So I think that's the thing, just get your education, that's very important. Mm-hmm. And, as the old song says, learn to talk like the man on the 6 o'clock news.
That's it. Well, thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Becky, this has been a real pleasure.
I appreciate you, my friend.
Yeah, same here. I've always been a fan of yours.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.